Every business has its own individual energy pattern, which fits within the energy pattern of humanity. By aligning to that individual energy pattern, a business can create a culture that thrives. Listen out in this episode for the list of destructive patterns found in many businesses that our cultural integrity audit has picked up. These are instances where businesses have disregarded or ignored their own energy pattern. So previously we've talked about the energy pattern of humanity, and we've looked at some like really bigger and broader concepts. But in this one, what I think we should look at is how we bring that collective circular collaboration and the speaking the truth and all of those parts, and how we bring that into an everyday application where we come together as individuals to form collectives that create. So we most likely experience this in organisations and business, but it really gives an insight into what we've been doing this whole year, 2024,
Yes.
here in Wisdom in Your Life. So I thought it'd be really good if we actually step through the process and steps that we go through to, well, on one level we call it clean up the culture, but really it's beyond that. You know, like we talked about in the previous podcast about individuals cleaning up so they can be part of the collective collaboration. It's how then we clean up the business.
Or the collectives.
Or the collective itself, which is the business. Because at the end of the day, we have to remember, and I know a lot of business owners don't like hearing this, but a business is, at the end of the day, a bunch of individuals that have come together to form an arbitrary collective around something. And that collective in and of itself is a living entity that often needs to be cleaned up, balanced, reconnected, understands its nature, so that it can function really well as a collective, collaborative entity that then creates, which comes back to that whole thing of bringing people together to allow things to emerge in the world.
Yeah, and I suppose touching on that, you said all of 2024, I was just about to say 2025, and that's not here yet. All of 2024 has been about unearthing energy patterns in businesses, in communities, and for us, and which culminated in the ability to unearth the energy pattern of humanity. Because for years I've known that, you know, every living thing has a nature, place and purpose. And we talk about that a lot, and we've been running nature, place and purpose for a long time. And then it became part of the nature was this unique energy pattern, and how that formed within individuals. And then us as a collective went, well, our business Wisdom in Your Life also has an energy pattern, but we didn't have. So this is actually the energy pattern of our business, but it's floating around in an arbitrary thing. And now that we've done the energy pattern of humanity, we can sit the energy pattern of humanity, then where does our business fit within the energy pattern of humanity? And then where do we, and this is my energy pattern, this is Bryn's energy pattern, and this is Storm's energy pattern, how do they all fit into Wisdom in Your Life?
In humanity.
Right? Because then when that's all aligned, then we can actually create abundance, an infinite abundance in however that is. Now that is all big stuff again, but what we actually do on a day-to-day with a business, which we've done several times this year, and we've started doing it in a community with what we call the Seven Sisters Project, where once again a big thing is we're going to get 7 women from a local community to unearth the energy pattern of the land there. And then they work together as a collective circular collaboration for that community. That's in a non-paid sort of area in lots of ways at this stage. But now let's talk about how this all came to be, because we actually did it with a business.
Well, we did it with 2 simultaneously at the start of the year.
Well, 3 with ours.
Oh yeah, ours too, yeah.
Yeah, because as
4 actually, 4 businesses, 3
yes.
owners.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then there was that other business that we unearthed.
Yes.
So do either of you want to talk through the process of that, or should we talk about sometimes the reason people have come to us in the beginning was because of the destructive patterns that they had, and maybe a little bit about the audit that identifies the destructive patterns. I don't know if we need to talk about that.
Yeah, so I find that often business owners have come to us because they have tried lots of things, but it's still not sticking. And there is this deep sense of knowing that's probably screaming out to them internally that something's going on, but they can't quite articulate it or put their thumb on it to do anything about it. So it's a lot more in an unseen space than a seen space. Because we can do all the, process re-engineering, put an IT system in, fire a few people, bring a few people in,
but that really
policies
doesn't
and
address
processes. We can do all of those things, but still it's like there's something in there.
Because the actual connections, the actual business is based on the relationships and connections between people.
And it's also based on false ideas, and I've just gotten some notes down here. But I wanted to go back just before we get into the flow of things, when Roz had put the energy patterns on top of each other and working out where they fit, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that. And I just want to land it for some people who may be listening around, when we talk about finding how it fits, it's actually around finding the place within the structure of the whole.
Yes.
Right? So we're really going back to basics, and we're talking about, 1, finding our place.
Yep.
Having our nature intact.
Yep.
And once those 2 are intact, then obviously a purpose unfolds, and when we work as a collective, we work in alignment to that as well.
Yes.
So I just wanted to...
Sorry.
It's for me as well, processing and facilitating myself as we go along, which also is anchored into, the scientific principle that we are fractals within the universe playing out. And that's an example of an underlying hidden pattern that we don't see, we're not taught. However, you saw, Ross saw, and you found each other on that, right? And other people see. So these are not just inklings and innate knowings, they're actually scientific principles.
Yes.
And so it makes sense in both of those aspects that it works in that way. And when we're talking about, businesses or any entity of sorts, going back into the conversation we just kind of came out of around how organizations function and what they move around, there's some organizing principle, right? But a lot of that, what I believe as well, and what I see is, again, I'll go back to my perspective on this, which is the false narratives that we give ourselves of how a business should function, right? Because there's language and literature out there that talks around when you go into a business or a company and the culture, and we've got the cultural audit as well, which picks up on the unspoken things, right? But the unspoken things are those hidden narratives that, however, keep a business functioning. Whether it serves the people or the business is another conversation to be had, but not exclusive of all of those other considerations as well. So that's what I see.
And that's really, really quite important, because while humanity self-organises around love, and each of us self-organise around our nature and our purpose. A business, we can state what the purpose is. And when you know your own energy pattern and then that of the business, it's very easy to see whether, I really fit in this business. This doesn't align for me.
Yep.
And when things don't align, it doesn't mean that you're dumb or it's wrong or anything like that.
Or anything,
yeah, it just means that the energy patterns don't align and things don't flow. And I think you said in one of the earlier ones about it being a collective of individuals. We're often thrown into workplaces as individuals and we get hired as an individual because we have this skill set. But if the team is doing this and you do this,
yes,
it doesn't matter how good you are, it's not going to work. And if everyone actually knew this when you apply for a job,
yes,
it's really easy
on both sides.
So on both sides.
On people looking for employees and employees looking for a job.
Yeah.
Which loops right back around to the podcast we spoke around humanity and communication.
Yes.
And when we communicate what our needs are and we know what we need and want, then we settle or align or are attracted to the places that align with us.
Yes.
Or we don't.
Conversely, when we don't know what our needs are and we're all muddled and we're not clear and we haven't done, we're not centred in that, we attract other people that aren't centred and we go to businesses and communities that are also out of misalignment, which then, and then we feel like a failure.
Yes.
So like attracts like in this regard.
Very true.
When we're not considering the whole.
Well, yes. And just touching on the fractal nature again, because there's a microcosm and a macrocosm, and we talked about that in relation to boarding school and businesses.
Yes.
But the other thing that I've probably discovered this week from doing this work is, and I've always known our mind is a fractal of the universe. So if you connect and integrate your mind, you'll have access to the universe. But what I discovered with this, doing the energy pattern of humanity, is that the whole of humanity is a reflection of the relationships and connections between the group of people. Right? And so we touched on this on another one about the trust and the flow between us and how it's taken time and energy, I suppose, for us to develop that and really know each other at such a deep level that there's just so much trust. And so that we can actually hold up a mirror to any of us at any time, and we'll be like, okay, I didn't really see that. And it's not a threat, it's not a thank you, rather than that's not me. Anyway, so I think we've talked about enough about that. Let's talk about some of the destructive patterns that happen in businesses that may start the conversation to come and see us.
Yeah, the sort of things that the audit picks up in the unseen space.
And the audit is in picture form, not words.
And super simple.
And super simple,
So some of the things we see is, so one of the classic is the division of the in-group and the out-group, them and us, right? And one of the most interesting things is that we can see on the audit sometimes that there's a very, there's the prevalence of this dynamic of them and us. But if you go and ask the employees who are us and who are them, everyone's can't really pin it down.
Yes.
So that's really, to me, that's fascinating because everyone's got this sense that they can bring forwards about there's an in-group and an out-group, right? But nobody can actually properly point to who it is, And
and once again, that division is actually a fractal of the wider community,
Yeah.
probably the colonisation pattern
Yeah.
of division between us and them.
Yeah.
So that's just reflecting that.
Others are often cultures can become polluted.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of complaining and whinging. And, you know, I like to think of the culture sometimes as like a hard drive. Somewhere between a hard drive and a battery. It's a hard drive that stores up all the true responses of all the management decisions that were ever made over the lifespan of the organisation. And a battery, because it stores that charge that was generated. Right? So it's like they always remember... Well, we don't even remember all the decisions.
Well, not consciously, but it's in the collective
it's in there.
unconscious of the business.
Yeah. So in a similar way that an individual develops defensive patterns from things that happen in their childhood, an organisation does the same thing. We can get the overbearing expectations, pressure and things like that. So we end up with unhelpful competition and things like that. We can have one that showed up in a few of our clients is the non-truth. So this is different to lying.
Yeah.
This is not speaking the truth. So it's speaking a sort of a non-truth. Which
Might as speak with forked tongue, you know, it's that whole thing. Oh, how do I look? Good. But then not good. Because everyone knows that that's not really the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Or a concrete example from one of our clients is everybody had a load of profile pictures taken for the website. Everybody collectively is going, oh yeah, they're great, they're awesome, you look so beautiful in it. Yeah, at home everyone's crying because they're like, I know I'm not out in the world because I look like terrible. And then individually it's like, I don't like it. But collectively everyone's like, oh, they're lovely and you look great. And so there's that sort of thing going on. There's the odd, the sort of avoidant delusion between the illusion and the reality of what's going on. You know, that sort of virtue signalling, we all do this, but really it's like, no, we don't.
And don't you find it that lots of businesses have these value statements or words at the end? And when you go to a business and they've got those words and then it's not that, doesn't that just jar you?
Yes.
I
haven't worked in
it doesn't surprise me anymore, unfortunately.
But
they can really be used for guilting a lot of people as well. You know, surely as a such and such company man or woman, you would want to be like, you know, and so there's that.
But that really illustrates that delusional image versus reality. So we have, and that can actually stop the business actually functioning. So it's a very destructive pattern, that one.
There's silos,
which
is a classic, and another one. My fiance works in the arts industry, has worked in events arts industry, and I tended to notice there's always this drama around not enough time, but working all hours, martyring through. Scarcity, and so, you know, and there are others that we can talk about, but these are like recurring themes that when you peel back the stories, the narratives, and the way people are, you know, explaining their behaviour or explaining their performance in reviews, you know, individually and collectively as teams, you peel back and you start to notice these are these patterns that have manifested themselves and taken hold within the culture.
Yes, and it's really important to note that it is within the culture. It's not within individuals.
No.
But too often when people think they've got a cultural problem, they do one or two things. They change the leader, but it's still in the culture.
Still stuck in that battery.
Or they target one person and that person becomes the scapegoat.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then they replace that person and then it happens again. And one of the companies we've worked for says that position is always has that problem. And it's actually in the culture. So,
and it's important to recognise that when we talk about the culture, right, the culture is in the space between. It surrounds us all the time. So it's almost like you enter, if that is the container of the organisation, you're in it, Roz is in it, Storm's in it. It's that space that surrounds us.
Yeah.
And because we are an active member of that, we are also a fractal of it. So this is how that bigger entity, because like the entity of the organisation will be this big and we're this big, that's how it influences us, which explains why, and many people can probably relate to this in their workplace, is you see a new person come in, they're all shiny and new and they're full of enthusiasm and this, that and the other. And everybody knows that within 2 to 3 months, they're going to be as cynical as everybody else. Why? Because they're cynical? No, because they turned up bright and shiny and new, right?
Yeah.
But the space that surrounds them and the dynamics that are at play, those destructive patterns, will soon influence that person because they are a fractal of it, and then they will take that on. And then the sad thing is that then goes home with them at the end of the day, and that can start to percolate out into the family as well, which is how these things spread.
which is exactly what we do in the opposite, because we unearth the actual energy pattern of the company and the individuals that they can actually work from there and this is why this is about creating, and it's about creating new ways of being, not just in the business, but you take that home.
Yes.
And that filters around.
Yeah.
Because you are the same person,
Yes.
whether you're at home, with your mates, at work, You know, you're never not you. You're always in your body, whether you're asleep or awake, and you're always moving around. This idea that I can be one person in this place, one person in this place, one person in this place, is another way that we fragment ourselves and lead ourselves to trouble.
Yeah.
So how do we go about this whole process? Well, interestingly, Roz, when you spoke about humanity earlier on, and then the company and the individuals, we sort of do it in reverse.
Yes.
By starting with an individual.
But not just a individual, because we create, we get a small group of individuals from that company. And when we first started, you know, I was like, well, it has to be the leaders because they have most influence. And we soon worked out that it doesn't have to be.
No.
We just need a group of people that are committed to be like cultural champions within the business.
Yes.
Right? And the process is, first of all, people have to identify their own energy pattern. But to do that, we have to first clean up the destructive patterns.
Yeah.
Or the false narratives
within
in
ourselves.
So we're working from the inside out again.
Yes.
Rather than from the outside in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is what we're
being taught. And that's the narrative. Has always been outside in.
Also been the structures.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not just the narratives.
And even to start that, we have to go back to the basics of human functioning, and some of the human functioning that we societally and normatively have not been taught how to do. So, how do I navigate my emotional landscape?
Yeah.
How do I deal with the uncertainty of change?
Yeah.
How do I move that? So, what to do with the map? You know, what is my nature? What is my core nature? And how does that connect? How does that connect and inform how I physically do and say in the world, the thinking, the feeling, spiritual and beliefs, the people I hang out with, and the spaces that I'm in. Right? So even just getting a connection to my core and being able to function as a human being, navigating the emotional landscape, which most of us never really got taught how to do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think it's important as well that people learn with all of those things combined and integrated when they go either back into a workplace or into a new one or into new spaces. They're actually able to identify when the integrated integrity which now exists within a person when it's being challenged, and what the threshold is for that person which requires them to say yes or no.
Yeah.
What is that? Right? And for me, that's been a huge game changer within some of the other spaces that I exist in my life. Around, I have learned what my integrity feels like in all these spaces, right? That doesn't require me to be part of me or over here or minimized or whatever it might be. And when I'm challenged from the rules around me, that the false narratives are then built into the structures, so I'm told what to do, that don't align with my integrity, how I am able to communicate in a way where it becomes a really successful negotiation rather than me just going, my hands are tied and I have to do this.
Yeah.
Because personally, I cannot, otherwise I can't sleep at night, because I'm fully here, I'm not partly here. And also, this is why I can't do, not just because of that, because X, Y, and Z logically, blah, 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 blah. The other person hears it, the other person understands it and connects with it. They're like, get it, let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
And it becomes a negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a solution moving forward that perhaps no one considered.
Yeah.
We just accept that the rules are the rules and we have to do what we do. How many times do we hear that our hands are tied and it's come from the top?
Yes.
That's nice. But
that does not.
Doesn't work.
Yeah. And that's the reality of bringing groups of people together, because, you know, even in the workplace, people have personal lives. They bring stuff to work, and working together, learning how to navigate the map, learning, you know, how who they are forms and who they're not. Right? And actually becoming who they are rather than who they think they are or who other people think they are. So we can be defined by others, or we can, you know, we can define ourselves by our thinking, or we can just be who we are.
Yes.
And to just be who we are is the easiest of all of them, if that's what's been nurtured. And so forming that collective circular collaboration, we as facilitators never actually know what's going to emerge or how that group's going to be. And we can't specify, the outcome is going to be this, this and this.
No.
Because you might have shown up like the first day and you're actually living as defined by who your grandmother wanted you to be. Right? And as we uncover who you actually are, you go, oh, actually, I can't do this job. Or I need to do the job this way.
It requires you to explore new ways of doing and being.
Yes.
You have to play with it, right, for it to develop, to then come together and collaborate.
And this is where the practice element. And the observation and the testing and the practice element comes in. It's not just do workshop.
Well, and also it's not just this bit of knowledge, because you have to actually be embedded in it. Because we are all connected in the web of life. We can't pretend we're not. And and that actually keeps us safe. We don't need external structures to keep us safe. And so, so doing it as a group, by the time you get to the workshop where we actually remove the destructive patterns from the individual, because individuals have learned destructive patterns. We're part of a society that has a whole heap of destructive patterns, whether it's an internal narrative, whether it's trauma, whether it's abuse that's happened to you, whether it's failing or even achieving. Because sometimes when people have achieved so much so quickly, they don't feel like they can make a mistake. So then they set up all these things to not feel that we can actually remove the destructive patterns. And then people can recognise what are their destructive patterns. Then we need some space for people to connect and integrate that within themselves and play and practice and all of that. And then we can come back, and then people can discern the difference between their destructive patterns and the destructive patterns in the culture of the business.
Yes.
They can discern their energy pattern from that of the business.
Yes.
Right? And so we can unearth the energy pattern of the business, their energy pattern, and remove the destructive patterns. And this happens in a really fluid way. We don't always do it in this structured order because it depends on the company.
What emerges.
Yeah. I will say, however, that the outcomes of our experience has always been within there a greater sense of clarity.
Oh, for sure.
That to me is just so clear. And that in itself, whilst we say we don't know what unfolds or what will become, we do know that clarity becomes clearer. Therefore, being able to make an informed decision on anything future related is, we see that more clearly, or they do. And because they've gone through a process of practicing the emotional landscape and cleaning it for themselves, they are physically, emotionally, and mentally in a more robust position to make that decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
greater, what I refer to as existential strength.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fully lined up. And we don't know what's coming. There's going to be uncontrollable unknowns, but I'll be all right and I'll exist out the back of it.
And it goes back to being centered and resilient within the chaos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now we have a new sense of resilience.
Yeah.
Because traditionally I used to think resilience as like a shield that held up. Now I see resilience as being like a bamboo.
Totally.
That is fully rooted in the ground but can go with the storm.
Yeah.
And still be there at the end of it.
That's right. Yeah. And personally, that's been a beautiful thing for me to see with the participants and the business and all of that through the workshops and progress that we've had.
Yeah, and just, I remember doing one workshop and a lady described it to me that when she came to the first day, she was grey. And every day of the workshop, and this went over 6 or 8 days, 1 week apart, a new colour arrived in her life. And so by the end of it, she was like a rainbow. She had all her colours back.
Yes.
And that is what the unearthing of who you really are is like.
Yeah.
Because, we are not encouraged to be who we are. And it starts from such a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. And whilst the energy pattern of us is the same, we have so many facets of ourselves that exist across our lifetime, right?
Yeah.
But I think one of the narratives is we get taught not to be that, or if you're this, you're not that.
Yeah.
Actually, you can be. There's no rules on that.
Because I was always very good at science and maths at school, I was told I shouldn't be good at English, and I actually wasn't that good. And then I was told I couldn't write books because I wasn't good at that. And I've written 4 books, and so we're often told what we can't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by actually having that deep knowing, you can call bullshit on things really easily. You don't actually have to have conflicts with anyone.
No.
Because you
can just decide not to be defined.
Yeah.
By anything external.
Yeah. And be defined by yourself, by the true nature and all the facets of you.
And what serves you and what doesn't, simply.
Yeah.
I think something I'd like to add to this, and it started for me when you were saying one of the outcomes we we always see it's greater clarity.
Yeah.
For me, and it's probably because of my energy pattern with my doing and destiny being around dismantling things. But I think it's also important to talk about because it's what happens as a result of these workshops in totality and some of the things that we've seen. So one of the things is that structures, and let's just call them structures, within ourselves, within teams, within organisations, that really deep down have no place being there, start to dismantle quite quickly, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen with our clients that has resulted in turnover of staff. It means that certain aspects of themselves that they held on to quite dearly are suddenly dismantled and they let go of.
Yeah.
And so this happens because, you know, we all want change, but we want change out here. But the change is going to happen in here. And once we start connecting to our nature, taking some of these patterns away, moving some of the gross emotions to one side, then that starts to gain a bit of momentum, and then that dismantling momentum starts to occur, and then bigger and bigger things start to crumble and I just want to be clear that have no place being there, whether it's in the organisation
or whether it's within you
or within
with
you.
your narrative.
Now, that when something is dismantled and crumbles, that leaves a big space, right? And that space can be hugely disorientating with a sense of feeling unanchored in the world, because that what was in there before is usually an anchor to something on the outside world, you know. And we saw in COVID, when everything was shut down, what happened when everyone's external anchors got taken away. There was a lot of, you know, so but then in that space, and it's I think this is where I've seen in my journey, and I've seen in a few others that I've been helping with this year, is helping them to be okay in that space for a period of time. Because if you remember, we talked about one of the facets of life is this self-organisation. What is meant to be from our core energy pattern will start to self-organise, and your natural ways of being will self-organise into that space. So you allow your true sense to grow into that. And that's how, on one level, the biggest effort is the dismantling, and what comes afterwards is actually becomes more and more effortless, because you start to self-organise from your core, and you suddenly learn new things about you, and or the business, all of a sudden everybody knows how the business should be structured, and it starts to align around that, and so things start to unfold and emerge,
and that is what is so exciting for me, because
yes,
that empty space that is created from the dismantling of stuff that doesn't have any place is where the creation comes from.
Exactly.
And the power of creation is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, for things to self-organise in ways we have no idea how they could do.
But it's that whole concept that like on a blank canvas you can create the Mona Lisa, or on a blank piece of paper you can create something new. And I'd never thought about the uncomfortableness of that empty space, because I think all my life I've created that empty space to allow creation, and I've never actually even considered that it would be uncomfortable
for
to
somebody
people.
who didn't get into this until his mid-latter 40s, wasn't used to that space. Believe you me, when it first turns up, you're like, whoa, what is this? I'm alone in the world.
And I had never considered it. And as you're sitting there talking about how it's a bit unearthed, I'm like, what?
And so that is something you know, I've had to support people with in getting used to. So you can open up bigger spaces and bigger spaces and bigger spaces. And those bigger spaces don't come from gross stuff. They come from super subtle stuff, as I have found out. And then so if we consider a business, I remember I was talking about it being this big and we're all in here. So when we take those destructive dynamics out and then we actually understand the true nature and the energy patterns of the company, that then starts to grow and self-organize into the culture. The culture is surrounding all the other people that have not necessarily come on the journey with us, but all of a sudden it will influence them because they're a fractal nature of it. And this is why, if I put my old business consultant hat on, trying to sell consultancy, doing this work is the most cost and time effective point of leverage to bring about fundamental change within an organization. It's so cost effective and time effective because the subtle changes in the culture, that then move into the structures, will be felt by everybody, far exceeding the 5, 7, 13 or however many people form that cultural group. And so those changes in the subtle unseen that surround everybody then affect everybody. And then that's when we start to see people who are quite comfortable in their destructive patterns suddenly that have been previously enabled by the culture, now feel really uncomfortable and feel like they need to go and find a new job. So there you go. And those that like it and thrive into it and always wanted it to be like that, will stay and be part of it and grow. And that's how this is such an amazing point of leverage for change.
But also, because as you said, within the individual this space is created, within the business, because it's the collective of all the people that are in there, the space becomes quite large to allow the creation of new. Right? Which is what I find so exciting.
Who doesn't want to go to work and get that?
Well, and creating something new and allowing it to emerge is what keeps us coming in and just hanging out together. So
well, that's exactly how we ended up surfacing the energy pattern of humanity.
I think I came in and went, today
we've got a job to do.
Because I was supposedly going to write an outline of a new program, and I was like, to do that, I think we have to put that into practice.
I remember.
And we're going to see if we can unearth the energy pattern of humanity. And then 2 weeks later, I came in with all my art supplies to build it.
So I think this has been a really valuable discussion because it brings back to here in everyday reality, which I enjoy touching down on, just how we go about doing it. I mean, obviously there's other steps along the way, but that's the main that's the main thrust, that's the main methodology, that's the main steps in which process.
And we can measure it all during the pre, middle and post audit to see. Or even in 5 years' time, we can do another audit. Or for the lifetime of a business, we can.
But I guess one of the things that's interesting is we certainly we can measure it throughout, but it soon gets to the point where the business owner and the people within it don't need external measurement tools because they know what's right and they know what has no place.
And what's right for them, not right and wrong.
So anything else?
No.
And obviously the same applies to sports teams and other groups, community groups,
communities, families. Industries. It would be good to do a whole industry one day. Imagine that.
Easily.
The potential is huge.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
And, the really cool thing about this is that once you get your head around, once you get your being and your doing around what we're doing here, you can take this stuff, even if it's in a business setting, and you can apply it into your private life. I mean,
or people come in privately and then take it to their business.
Yeah, either or. I mean, after our experience earlier in the year with a couple of our client groups, how many Santrays did I then do to clean out the relationships all around me?
Yeah.
And clean those up.
Yeah.
And my life has gone in terms of, ease and grace in and around it. So once you have this skill and capability that has been born out of practice and lived experience here in the moment, because we're not about
with a bit of the science and
stuff, but we're not about endless PowerPoint presentations. It's here in your experience, which is where it's all happening.
Yeah, always here in time and space.
Here in time and space. Then what you've learned, you can apply in other facets of your life as well, beyond whether it's a private person. So there we go. Anything else?
Come and call us.
Yeah.
Come and have a chat. Cup of tea.
Chat.
Hang out with us for a bit.
Yeah.
Ask more questions.
Or not.
Or not.
Just sit with us. Whatever.
Or come and do.
Come and do.
And be.
Come and do and be.
Yeah.